Welcome to our post-spring showcase coverage from Sun Devil Stadium. I'm Nick Borgia for Devil's Digest. Alongside me is our publisher, Hode Urbino. And Hode, football pundits often say that the spring showcase doesn't really accurately reflect what goes on in the rest of the 14 spring sessions that football teams have. Would you say that's the case for ASU football this season?
Well, I think the pundits are normally right about that, but I would say even with limited viewing, with the 14 sessions that led up to tonight, I would say that pretty much what we expected to see, the defense ahead of the offense, I think that did materialize tonight. I think the offense at times definitely had problems moving the chains, making big plays down the field. I think when it comes to the offensive line, we saw a pretty noticeable drop-off from the first team to the second team, and that's why the defensive line, I thought, was really able to make a lot of plays in the offensive backfield by and large. And really the defense, I thought that not only the front seven, which we knew coming into spring practice was going to be very stout, but also the secondary had some really nice pass breakups. The second and third teamers got to tackle, and we saw some big time hits from the players from those groups. But overall, yeah, I think the offense did struggle somehow. And you and I talked about this earlier in the spring. You have the defense really just more of the same in terms of scheme. The offense just really learning a brand new scheme altogether that definitely does have some changes, some modifications from last year's style. So for the offense, it's still going to be work in progress. I don't think the offense was horrible tonight, but I think the defense definitely outplayed the offense in the spring showcase. And again, maybe not a whole lot different than what we saw in the 14 sessions preceding tonight.
And who are some of the players that stood out to you from both sides of the ball, leading up to tonight's spring showcase?
So when I look at the defense, I think the defensive line, as I mentioned, was really able to penetrate the backfield more often than not. And it wasn't only players that have been pretty dominant all spring, like Omar Norman-Lott or Teacher Pesafea, for example. But I also thought players like Stanley Lambert, really young players like Garen Stansbury and Robbie Harrison. I think those players definitely did make their mark. And like I said, in the case of Stansbury and Harrison, when they played on the second team, they were able actually to live tackle. So we even got to see their play accentuated that much more. In terms of linebackers, I just feel they're just really solid from top to bottom. I don't really, one linebacker really stood out over the rest, but I think that too deep of that position group is definitely a strength of the Sun Devils going into fall camp in the 2022 season, for that matter. But look at the secondary. I think a lot of players were really impressive. Keon Markin, Willie Hart, so the safety that's been somewhat MIA in the last couple of years, I thought really had one of his best practices, spring or fall camp, that we've seen in the last couple of years. Corey Bethley, the safety from Hawaii, had a big hit too. There really were like 2 or 3 pass breakups, Nick, that actually prevented touchdowns. So that really just contributed to the offensive struggles that much more. So those are the players that stood out on defense. On offense, it's really hard to really point out anybody in specific. I thought Paul Tyson, Dylan McLemore, when I look at the quarterbacks, I think probably performed somewhat better than the others. Ben Meredith, the freshman quarterback from Alabama, he actually is the only quarterback that threw a touchdown pass to walk on Coben Bourget, one of the last plays of the spring showcase. So that's 2 other players that I thought really were able to stand out more. I didn't see really anything really in the wide receivers. Maybe Brian Thompson a little had some some noticeable plays here and there. I would say the running backs, Daniel Ngata and Xavier Valade, again maybe having the benefit of not being live tackled like the backup running backs, but I thought they really showed a lot of shiftiness, a lot of elusiveness. And I think that this offensive line, that I think by and large has played fine, can really be a very stout run gap producer for the Sun Devils this year. So those are players that really stood out, more or less. Again, it's really kind of hard to evaluate the first teamers when there's thud tackling. But again, we were able to maybe do somewhat more of accurate evaluating with the second and third teamers. And I think overall, some of the newcomers, some of the young players are really impressed. And for players like that, it's just really important to start, hitting the ground running in spring practice, because usually when you have a good spring practice session, more oftentimes than not, that leads to a good fall camp and obviously bleeds over to the regular season. So to see players even like Garen Stansbury and Robbie Harrison on the defensive line, for example, Corey Bethley, the safety transfer from Hawaii, really have a strong spring, a strong showing tonight. I think they can bode really, really well for them in August and beyond.
And as we know, that starting quarterback competition is going to be one of the things that's on the Sun Devils' minds leading into that fall camp. But are there any other storylines that may be worth paying attention to, as we come into the fall?
Yeah, I mean, as far as the quarterback competition, I mean, again, I don't think anything got determined tonight. I don't think anything got determined over the 14 practices that preceded tonight. So I think that is definitely a big TBD situation, if you will. And again, Herm Edwards, as we know, did hint that maybe the starting quarterback is not on campus yet. Maybe they do dip into the transfer portal in the upcoming weeks or months. So that's going to be interesting to see if that actually does come to fruition. But I think when it comes to the defensive line, I think it's pretty much settled. I mean, again, Chris Martinez, the guard transfer from San Diego State, is he able to beat Spencer Lovell for first-team right guard? I think that's a competition that's still going to continue into fall camp, so that's going to be interesting to see. But I think otherwise the front five is set. As far as running backs, Daniel Ngata, Xavier Valade, 1 and 1A. I think it's really going to be that scenario. And I know that this time, maybe last year, we were talking about Rashad White and Chip Trainin being 1 and 1A, and I don't think that ever materialized with Rashad White being an absolute workhorse for the Sun Devils. But I don't think that's going to be the case in 2022. I really think that there's going to be a pretty even distribution between Ngata and Valade, and I think that can make the team better for that. Jalen Connors and Messiah Swinson at tight end. I think those are two players that maybe at times are going to battle for first-team reps, but I think in a two tight end set, which I think we're going to see a lot from the Sun Devils in 2022. I think those are definitely going to be the first two tight ends that are going to line up in that scheme. At wide receiver, as we know, Elvie Bunkley-Shelton really was not able to practice for nearly an entire spring. So when he comes healthy to fall camp, who is going to be the odd man out of Ricky Parasol, Brian Thompson, and Elijah Badger, who pretty much were the trio of starting wide receivers the entire spring. So those are really the position battles that I see happening on offense. Before I go to defense, I don't want to skip over special teams because we know there's a very talented incoming freshman kicker coming in who actually was here tonight at Sun Devil Stadium, Carter Brown. So him and Jace Feely, in terms of being the starting place kicker, I think that's going to be a very fierce battle come August. When it comes to the defense, it really was somewhat an incomplete picture. I mean, as much as you're excited to see so many players that normally would be second teamers, like TJ Pesafea, like Omar Norman Lott, even guys like Robbie Harrison and Garen Stansbury performing well, not only tonight but the entire spring. Now you got coming off the bench, if you will, Jermaine Lole after missing all of last season with an injury. Nessa Silvera, the transfer from Miami at nose tackle, wasn't able to practice in the spring. Should be ready to go to fall camp. And those guys right there are probably two starters. Then you got Trevez Moore at defensive end, who played only 3 games last year. So I think in the defensive line there's going to be some really, really interesting battles. In the linebacker, again, I thought it's just really, really set over there. So the starters, I feel, not only in fall camp, but also in the season opener, as far as like Kyle Solet, Mike, flanked by Merlin Robinson and Eric Gentry. I think those are going to be your starting linebackers. When it comes to the secondary, even though there may have been some position battles the first couple of weeks of spring, I think it's pretty much settled down with the starting cornerbacks being Keon Markham and Tamarcus Davis, and at safety, Chris Edmondson and Kewan Markham. So I won't be surprised if really when it comes to linebackers and secondary, what we saw tonight in the spring showcase is not going to be a whole lot different than the season opener at the defensive line by default, because they had guys like Lole and Silvera and Trevez Moore that were sidelined all of spring. I think they can definitely make their way to the starting lineup in fall camp and to begin the 2022 campaign.
Well, thank you so much, Hode. For more top-tier ASU football coverage, make sure you check out DevilsDigest.com. Also drop a follow on Twitter at DevilsDigest. But until next time, I'm Nick Borges. This has been Hode Urbino for Devil's Digest. We thank you so much for tuning in.